Today's presentation is on fleet risk solutions. And as we were looking over the calendar and what we were presenting, I thought, oh, this is kind of a breeze. We'll get through this, give some great best management practices in a short amount of time and be down the road. And then I started preparing and building the presentation, and I thought, oh boy, there's a lot of material to cover in this. So I will give you a warning ahead of time. I'm going to try to not go very long on this, but I am going to be referring you to some additional webinar recordings on our YouTube channel, because there's some depth that is necessary for many of these best practices that we're going to talk about. And on several of these, I've already completed a webinar, and we've got a recording of that. And so there'll be a link that you can go to if you're watching this on YouTube. If not, we'll send you to our YouTube channel there, and you can find all of that information there. But it is a big subject, so just let's hold on tight, and we'll drink from the fire hose. To start out, driving is dangerous. Every year in, year out, auto accidents are one of our biggest losses that we see at the trust. And you know this. You've seen the type of incidents that happen. And when we put thousands of cars and thousands of people out on the road, bad things happen sometimes. And in just the recent few years, we've seen a marked increase in our auto accidents, our auto claims. And that's concerning to us. You can see where we're at in 2023. Well, it looks really good right now, but we still got 4 months of the year left, and those claims to come in. So we'll see where we're at. We're crossing our fingers that we can keep it under 400. But it's something that's definitely of concern. And over the years, there have been some big ones. I look back about 10 years, and we've spent about $24 million on auto liability claims. That's a pretty major chunk of money. And unfortunately, some of those come in at a at a time when we have a single claim that can be millions of dollars, because it's a very significant one. So we know that fleet, our vehicle operations, gives us a lot of risk. So we've got to be involved with that. So how do we make driving safer? Well, we make our driving safer by managing our fleet and by managing our drivers. Those two things, if we'll pay attention to those things, many of the challenges go away. Now, there's always that crazy risk, somebody loses control out on the highway and hits our people. But there's a lot of prevention that we can do on our end to make our fleet safer and make our drivers safer. And like I said, we got a lot to talk about. And so here are the best practices that I came up with that I think are really some of the most important things that we can do to make our fleet operations as safe and cost effective as we can do. So I won't read all of those, because we're going to talk about each of those. Policies. You guys love to hear about paper in these presentations. Oh, I got to write something. Well, it's important that we have policies to guide how we run our operations. And some of these are pretty basic things. What's appropriate use of our company cars? Is it appropriate to have passengers or riders in there? If my board members or city council folks go to a conference in St. George, is it appropriate for them to take their spouse or passenger along in that company car to go to the conference? Well, this is a decision that we have to make, and we get these questions quite often. One thing that's important to note is that insurance follows the vehicle, not the driver. And so that car is insured. Who we have in it is the other question. If we have employees in that vehicle riding along, they're covered under workers' compensation insurance. If we have people who are not employees, well, they're not covered under workers' compensation. And so if there's an incident that happens, that may be problematic if they're injured in that incident. So those are some thoughts that go into that. I'm not telling you not to do that, but what I'm saying is let's have a well thought out vehicle use policy. What's appropriate use? Things like Things like take-home policies for vehicles. Now, there's some state law that goes around that as well, but it also is important that we think about if people take their company car home at the end of the day, what does that do to our risk? And we see a significant number of claims come from parking lots or driveways of people's homes where their company cars run into by a family member. So think about those things. Once again, I'm not saying don't do this, but let's go into it with our eyes open to what our risks are. Other things, what about on-call policy, those types of things? And other policies, driver qualification. And we'll go into a lot of detail on that, but this should be a written policy. This is one of those things where we can have problems if we don't treat everybody equally when we start looking at people's driving records and whether people are appropriate to drive or not, or if we have to do discipline sometimes. So have a written policy that says this is how we're going to qualify our drivers. And we have a great boilerplate. I will send that out to you as we respond to everybody that signed up for the webinar. I'll send that out with our follow-up email. Drug and alcohol testing. Now, if you're a CDL operator, you're going to be in a drug and alcohol testing program. Aside from that, we make a decision on what we do as far as drug and alcohol testing. And that was one thing. Another thing that I was going to say on that big list of all of the best practices, one of the very last one was DOT and CDL program management. So when we have commercial motor vehicles, and I put that at the end on purpose because some of you don't have that, and when we get to that point, you can check out, because that's one of those technical things. But I will talk about DOT stuff a little bit as we go through. DOT is very specific about our testing policy, our program and our policy, and how those things all work. And so we want that in a written policy that says this is exactly how we do it. Another great policy to have is a backing policy. Unfortunately, this is year over year the #1 preventable cause of car crashes that we see. And so having a simple policy that states how are we going to park our cars can really help out. And some things are simple controls that we can put into place. And we'll send out a boilerplate backing policy for you as well. And you can decide what you want to add, if you want to change it up a little bit. Along with that, seatbelt use. Now, I know this is a state law, but we need to reinforce this as an employer and say, we expect you to wear your seatbelt, and we're going to watch that and see how you're doing. And this goes for everybody, whether you're in a public works job where you're driving around the street and I'm only going half a block, put your seatbelt every time, or a police officer that's out there, put your seatbelt on. It's simple and statistically backed that seatbelts are going to save lives, and so we want to support that through our policy. EVO, emergency vehicle operations, a policy around that. What's appropriate? Who gets the training? What does the training involve? And what is our goal from the training? I like to see a policy around that specifies what it is. It's not just go out to a parking lot and throw some cones up and go cut donuts. Let's make sure that means something, and it jives with our other policies, pursuit policies, and EVO policies as well. All right, what about our vehicles? As we're managing our fleet, purchasing vehicles is a major part of that. That's a huge portion of our budgets each year, is the cost of buying and operating vehicles. And unfortunately, sometimes the maintenance and repairs on those vehicles can be a major part of that as well. Your vehicles are a risk to your operation. And so as we go about selecting vehicles, let's follow a process. I don't recommend that we just say, hey, departments, tell us what vehicles you need. let's go through a process and decide what is the right vehicle for the job. Sometimes we see claims come in where blind spots are a big problem, and there's a toolbox on the back of a truck, or we have a big piece of equipment, a garbage truck or something like that, that lacks a backup camera. Those are some real oversights in our purchasing that can contribute to claims, contribute to incidents. And I always go back to the dead kid thing. Everything else aside, I don't want a dead kid on my conscience because we couldn't see or we didn't have a backup camera. Let's put those things in place. Let's think about the equipment, what makes sense to us, and get everybody on the same page there. All right. And then think about adequate replacement cycles. If our vehicles get too old to where they're not reliable, that's a risk to our organization as well. That's a risk to our people. If our vehicle breaks down out on the freeway, well, that is a major risk to our people. And so build that into your process. And I know budgets are always tight, but we've got to think about what that is. We recently changed vehicles here at the Trust, and we're noticing a different type of maintenance is required with these vehicles than what we've done in the past. And that's definitely going to impact our overall cost and how much our people are able to be out doing their jobs. Because if their vehicles have to be repaired more, or have other maintenance, then that's going to cost us in our productivity and dollars. Coverage on insurance. Of course, the trust is there for you and offers you that coverage, but you've got to ask yourself some questions. What do we cover? What do we insure? There's a difference between liability coverage and auto physical damage. We call it APD in the industry. And that's basically, you may know it as comprehensive or collision insurance. And that's when it's not somebody else's fault, but we want our vehicle repaired anyway. And so there's different types of coverages there, and you want to talk with our guys here from the Trust about what's appropriate. Some decide to use that to purchase the APD, and some don't. And a lot of that depends on the type of vehicle it is, and it also depends on your budget and how much you want to spend on those things. But make sure it is covered. And what do I mean by that? Periodically, this is something that should be, if you're the designated safety officer or the person over fleet with your organization, you should be taking a look at your schedule of vehicles and determine, do we still have that car? We've had members of the Trust go out and do this after a few years of not doing it, and they found dozens of vehicles that they no longer owned, that they had been paying for insurance for this whole time. And the scarier part of that is if you have vehicles out there that you haven't added to your schedule. So that's definitely something that I would put on if I'm managing vehicles, that at least once a year I'm going in and verifying what my schedule is, and do we still have all of those vehicles, and have we added anything that we haven't added. We try to make it really easy here at the Trust to add your vehicles. We have our application called My Trust, where you can go in and add vehicles on your own. You just need some basic information about the vehicle, and you can add it to your schedule. Oops, I forgot. I was going to have one of these in my hand, and I totally forgot to grab one coming in here. Insurance packets. We provide it's a nice little envelope that has your proof of insurance, a notepad to take notes and have witness statements if you have an incident, a incident investigation form or an accident form, and a pen. And we give those out for all of your vehicles that are out there. If maybe you've got some new vehicles in that you don't have those for, give us a note, and we'll definitely get those out to you. And just take a look at what vehicles have those and what don't. Okay, shifting gears a little bit, Mike. I'm talking a lot already. Do we have any questions or comments? I see a number in the chat.
Nope, that's just me.
Okay. All right. Vehicle maintenance is part of our fleet program, our fleet risk program. because preventative maintenance helps keep our vehicles running and not breaking down out on the road. So designing your maintenance program, and that could be using a dealership or a repair shop to do those types of things, or in-house mechanics. Along with that goes vehicle inspections, periodic inspections, and like I said, there's difference between DOT and passenger vehicles, and so some of those are required for DOT. It is required for a commercial motor vehicle, and as of just a couple of years ago, it's safety inspections no longer required in the state of Utah for our passenger vehicles. However, it's still an important thing that we are doing those regular safety inspections, and that should be a part of our overall fleet operation, is at least an annual safety inspection. And then we'll talk about other inspections in a minute. What's our out of service procedure? How do we deal with that if a vehicle has a problem, and have we trained all of our drivers on that so they're not out there driving a vehicle that may be unsafe? Hey, these brakes don't feel very good, but I got some work to do. That's a bad thing. So let's make sure that everybody's trained, and that's part of our procedure. Documentation. You guys get tired of me telling you to document things, but if it isn't written down, it never happened. If one of your vehicles is involved in a serious accident, the maintenance history of that vehicle may be very important in the ability to defend yourself in a lawsuit. And so there should be a vehicle history file for every vehicle, documenting what repairs, what maintenance, what inspections, all of those things. Did we cover the recalls? There may be a manufacturer ordered recall. Have we done everything that we're supposed to? And does our shop, if we have our own mechanics working on these, do they keep a log of all the maintenance that they do? Those types of records are key to be able to show that you've been reasonable and prudent about doing your vehicle maintenance and managing your fleet to the best of your ability. So just on inspections of vehicles, just like we said, the commercial motor vehicles still have a requirement for an annual safety inspection. But what about our passenger vehicles? Put those in the list as well. I think that's really important. And most anywhere you go to get your vehicle maintained, you can say, "Hey, I want a safety inspection as well," and they'll do that for a nominal price, sometimes free. What about trailers? What about those things that we're dragging around? I think those are an often overlooked portion of our fleet risk that can be really, really serious. We've had situations where trailers have become detached for one reason or another and caused serious accidents. We've had some that have been near misses that could have been a really serious thing as well. So a trailer inspection is also important. Something down to as simple as, do we use the same ball hitch for all of our trailers? You might have two, one for the really heavy trailers and one for the smaller, but instead of having multiple different hitch sizes, that would be a good best practice. Okay. All right. And a form is always good to use for those things as well. Annual inspections. This is just what DOT says here. Every 12 months, they need to be inspected by a qualified inspector. And then we have frequent inspections. These are what are normally called pre-trips. And this is one of those areas where I'll point somewhere and say, hey, there will be a link up here to a recording on our YouTube channel for pre-trip inspections. But a commercial driver needs to do a pre-trip inspection every time before they take that vehicle out for the day. So pre-trip and post-trip may also be involved as well. Pretty much in all situations, if there's anything that's identified, that post-trip is going to be there as well. And do these need to be documented? Well, this is the federal form, driver's vehicle inspection report. When do I have to document that and fill that out? Well, if I'm just carrying property, right? I'm driving a gravel truck or something like that. I only need to complete that when deficiencies that affect the safety are noted. What about vehicles carrying passengers? Well, it's every trip, every day. And so they're going to be filling those out. What do I do with these reports when they're done? This is something that I recommend that you collect and keep those things, because it's a history of us doing the right thing. Well, what if it shows that we had problems? That's okay. There will be problems from time to time with your vehicles, and you just document that we fixed it. We identified it, we took it out of service, and we fixed that thing. That is a record showing that we're being reasonable and prudent. Okay. Moving on to different types of best practices that we can use. And I put this under continual monitoring because there are a few different ways that we can monitor our drivers and our vehicles. And I say in here, use data to make good decisions. We have the ability to gather immense amount of data and use it. Problem is, many times the data is there, but we don't use it. Most vehicle companies now have some sort of a telematics program where you can see what's going on with the vehicle, and you can run reports, and you can see how many vehicles are beyond where they should have their oil changed, how many vehicles have their fuel levels, they're about out of gas on any given day. You can also, from that telematics, see how your drivers are doing. And you can run a report that shows what your drivers are doing out there that may be risky behavior. So this is for new vehicles that is really included in purchasing that vehicle. You can go out and get this information from those, or there are other companies that you can buy a simple plug that goes in the OBD port, and you plug that in, and it does the same thing. We've used both here at the Trust, and both have their positives and negatives. And if you want to talk about that, I'd be happy to discuss what we've gone through. But I've got to move along. Telematics is something that gets people's dander up just a little bit. You're spying on me. And I have to admit, I have a little bit of the same thing. Hey, I'm a good driver. You don't need to watch me. Well, it's not about that. It's about really looking at our overall risk. And it's funny, when we implemented telematics here, I was a bit frustrated because I would get an alert that said hard brake. You're pushing the brakes too hard there. I'm like, no, I'm not. But it definitely gave me information real time that helped me to be a better driver. And the same thing goes, there'll be hard brakes or rapid starts, or aggressive actions, those types of things. And it can be real-time feedback to that driver and help us all be better. So supervisor observations are probably one of the most important things, and probably one of the rarest that we actually take action on. And that's why I bring that up, is our supervisors need to be aware of the employees that they're supervising, their driving behaviors. And if they see something that's inappropriate or appropriate, they need to take action on that, and either reinforce the positive or correct the negative and redirect that person. There are other things that you can look at. DOT has a database that you can go into, and it will talk about, this is if you have commercial motor vehicles and you're a carrier under DOT, you can see information using your DOT number on the safety of your fleet. That's pretty cool information. So use that data to make us better. All right, next section is driver qualification. This is something that we try to help you out with at the Trust, but you got to have a policy in place. We're going to verify that our drivers all have a valid license. Well, how often do people's licenses lapse? Well, every month we send out reports, and there are dozens and dozens of people who have either had their licenses expire or they've been denied for some problem with the driver's license. And that's something that you can monitor on a monthly basis and help people stay in compliance. And most of the time, it's just a phone call. Hey, you forgot to renew your driver's license. Oh, I knew I needed to do that. Get it done, because you don't have a valid driver's license, and you can't drive until you do. You can look at accident history as well, and also evaluate their motor vehicle record. We send you out a report once a month. You have to participate in this, and it's a requirement to have auto coverage here with the trust, is to submit your drivers and get their and all you have to do is give us their driver's license numbers. We don't want any more information than that. We'll put those in, and then each month you will get this report that shows, is their license valid and what kind of violations are on their record. And what do I do with that? Well, I'm going to evaluate our drivers, and we're going to put them into our policy, our driver qualification policy, and see how they pan out. All right. This is what the report looks like. And so you can see how your organization is performing as compared to the trust. If you have more drivers with violations or less than the trust. We have the watch list. This is another important section here. This is where anybody that has an expired or denied license or a problem with their license will show up there. And then we can, it'll give you a code that says, and you can see up above, that legend tells us what those codes mean. So denied medical requirement. Most of the time that one is around for CDLs and the medical card. They haven't submitted their medical card, or there's a problem with the medical requirement there. Okay. All right. So just a question out here. What percentage of drivers have something on their record? We have tens of thousands, somewhere over 15,000, in between 15 and 20,000 drivers in our pool that we run these reports on once a month. So of those, what percentage do you think have something on their records? Well, it's about 9.7%. Not that many. So over 90% of our drivers have nothing on their license. And you can see in here, if you have 2 violations on your record, there's only 1.256% of all of those drivers in local governments in the state. So that should help help you and help our drivers understand just what kind of risk they're posing to the organization. We recommend you use a matrix. I think this is an easy way to look at it. Take the moving violations and the at-fault accidents and put those on this matrix and determine, does this person have acceptable driving history? If they don't, doesn't mean they can't work there, but we'd probably prefer that they're not driving for our organization if they have this. If they're borderline, well, that's something where we're going to be coaching them and providing them training. This boilerplate policy that we have for you for driver qualification has what's acceptable, what's borderline, what's unacceptable. And you can take a look at that and tune it up for your organization and how you use it. But I think it's a great starting point. Driver training. Whoops, I went too far. There we go. Driver training. We need to make sure our drivers are adequately trained for the types of vehicles that they're driving. Now, it's pretty simple. If somebody's driving a passenger car, you have a valid driver's license, and you don't have an egregious history, well, go out and drive the car. But as our equipment becomes more complex, it becomes more required for us to verify that our drivers are okay. There are a lot of guys out there that'll say that, oh yeah, I can drive that backhoe, I can drive that semi, I can drive that 10-wheeler. I've been doing this forever. But if our supervisors will get in there as part of their interview process, they'll know within about 30 seconds whether this person is blowing smoke or if they're actually an operator of those types of vehicles. So let those supervisors coach, and let's require the supervisors to coach those drivers so we're better. Training programs, we recommend that you do defensive driving for every driver biennially. That means every other year. Like I said, we'll be doing that in October on a regional basis, so you can come and attend those. We have various different webinars as well on our YouTube channel that you can use. So get people out on that. And then new drivers should, of course, have a defensive driving training within their first year. Moderate risk drivers, if they're in that matrix and they're showing that they're borderline, they should go to a defensive driving course. Drivers that have accidents should go to a defensive driving course, and that's something that I would set in policy and just say, hey, this is the deal. You get in an accident or you're in a borderline, you're going to be going to defensive driving until we drop that off your record or improve your record. EVO, emergency vehicle operations, that's a requirement that all drivers driving emergency vehicles do that annually. Okay, supervisors, like I said, obligation to do something. If they see something amiss in driving, they should say something. Ride-alongs are things that can really improve our driving performance. Having discussions with operators if they see something, and telematics is also something that we can see and respond to and say, you know what, we're seeing a lot of issues with this. And the person might be mad, oh, you're watching me. Well, yeah, and you also have been slamming on your brakes a lot lately. So let's talk about how that's happening. Accident reporting and investigation. It's important that we report all incidents so we can review all incidents. Supervisors are key in investigating these accidents and making sure we get all of the details. It's important to have an accident kit, and I talked about that, where we have our little folder or envelope with your proof of insurance and the ability to use a notepad to get witness statements and a form to collect information to help them through. Make sure those are in all of your vehicles so they have it. Talk to your drivers about how do they go about dealing with an accident. Hey, I just got rear-ended here. What do I do? If they've talked about that ahead of that accident, it's going to be a lot easier for them to walk through what they need to do to respond there. And let's always look for root causes. What do we do to prevent this from happening again? And those are the corrective actions that are there. It may be, hey, there's a problem with this vehicle, and it has bad blind spots, and that's contributing reason why they backed into a pole in the parking lot. So let's look at that vehicle. Or we haven't done training, or we don't have a backing policy, or you name it. There are a lot of different things that can fall into that. Okay, share those lessons learned so everybody gets better. Okay, we covered a lot of stuff, and now I'm to the DOT CDL, and I'm already over time what I promised. So if you don't have commercial drivers, you can skip out now, and we'll answer questions at the end if you want to hang around for that. But DOT and CDL is a big program, and we need to have one person that really owns that program in each organization. And you say, am I a covered employer under DOT regulations, Department of Transportation regulations? And the answer is, if you have commercial motor vehicles and you have CDL operators driving those, you are covered, and all of these things apply. And so let's look at the list here. Driver qualification. Now, we already talked about that, only it goes a little bit deeper when it comes to CDL operators, record keeping. A huge pile of paper that you need to keep for CDL compliance or DOT compliance. Driver training, that's a new animal that we've got there. Hours of service. Drug and alcohol is a requirement, and we have to be in compliance with that. And so let's dive into a couple of these things. What kind of documentation, paperwork do I need to have in driver qualification files? These are confidential files. Generally, it'll probably be either risk management or human resources or legal or somewhere like that that will manage these files. But you can do it how you want at your facility. We need to have a copy of their CDL. Going back 4 years. So if they've had came from another state, we ought to have that as well. Their latest motor vehicle record report, and you need to run that one at least once a year. The latest driver record evaluation. So you go in, you have the obligation as an employer of CDL operators to look at their driver records and make an evaluation of it and document. This is what we found, and this is where we're going. Their application for employment, an annual list of their violations, and you can get that from our monthly report. Driver's authorization to contact previous employers. This is a requirement under that standard as well. And you're obligated as an employer to check references on truck drivers or bus drivers or anybody driving a commercial motor vehicle. That's an obligation, is that you follow up on references. And then this one is a relatively new, it's not new, but it's about 3 years old since it became obligatory that you have to, it was a legal requirement, and it's the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse authorization. So you need to get an authorization from the employee that says, I can check your record in the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. So this is a requirement, a federal requirement, that if somebody, one of your drivers, fails a drug or alcohol screen, you're obligated to submit that information to the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. This is part of the Department of Transportation, and that information is made available to potential new employers. The testing agencies also submit this information, and you can use it, and you're obligated to use that when you hire a new employee. You're also obligated to use that system at least once per year to go in and do a simple query. And all that does is you can put your drivers in, and it will pop up and say, this driver has an entry in the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. It doesn't say what it is or anything like that. Once you see that there's an entry there, then you're obligated within 24 hours to do a full query and find out what that information means and determine whether that driver is legal to continue driving. So this is a pretty onerous thing. It's not terrible, but it's something that you have to do. And it's something that DOT wants you to be participating. You have to register to be a part of this. You use your DOT number for that. This is a really detailed standard. This is the quick and dirty version of it, if you can believe that. I'll send out another. We'll show a link somewhere up here to a webinar that we did on the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse. All right, the next one is on training requirements for drivers. It used to be that you could go in, if you could pass the CDL test, and you could drive a truck well enough to get through the driving test, you had your CDL. Pay the fee and you're good to go. Well, not so much anymore. Now, if we have new drivers coming in, they're called entry-level drivers. There is something called entry-level driver training that is required for each of those new drivers. And it needs to be done through a provider, a qualified provider under US DOT regulations, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, to be exact. And that has made it kind of a challenge. Especially when this first came out, there were not a ton of providers in the area, and they were charging a lot of money, and they were requiring people to be in these classes for months. And so it was going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars to get a new CDL operator. That has improved a bit. It's still not great, but it's improved a bit. What I want to tell you about this, and you know, it's a challenge. You know what, I feel you. I feel this problem, and I've had the discussion with a lot of you out there. It's a challenge, and it's just a new regulation that has made this really hard. In the long term, I think it's going to be great. But in the short term, it's definitely a challenge. So I just say on that, plan ahead. It's going to cost you a lot more money, and it's going to take more time to get new drivers certified and licensed to operate commercial motor vehicles. Look out there and identify the best training providers. And we've got the chat function in here. If you found a training provider that is working really well for this, I would love to hear about it. I've discussed this with several of the applied technology colleges in the state. I'm like, guys, we gotta streamline this a little bit. Our people are struggling out there. So anyway, I'm gonna move on. There may be some questions on that as we get to the end, but let's move on. Logging your hours or hours of service. I'm not going to go into detail on this because, hey, guess what? There's a link up here, and we did a webinar on that not too long ago, and so the link will take you to that and walk you through those things. But is that required for local government agencies? What about snowplow operations and all of that? So that's just a teaser to go to that webinar and see those things. But here's how that all goes, and this is just a teaser as well because we don't have time to go through all of that. Drug and alcohol testing. Once again, you're required to do this if you have CDL operators. And so there's pre-employment testing that we need to do, and there's also the random pool. Most of us will join what they call a consortium, which is most of the time just a clinic, and we pool a bunch of drivers, and they pull names out of the random pool there, and that's who gets tested. It's for drugs or alcohol. And once again, we have this drug and alcohol clearinghouse. Got to give that notice. And I've got to do a limited query for everybody each year, and then a full query for pre-employments. And if something is listed on that limited query, I've got to go in and do that. Wow, that was a lot of stuff to talk about. Apologize, we've gone long. This is just a ton of material. But I'm here to tell you, this is an essential part of our operations, is being intentional about our fleet program, not just saying, yeah, your truck's out there, keys are left in it, and go and drive and do your job. Let's be intentional about that. Let's be intentional about our drivers. Let's be intentional about qualifying those drivers and buying the right vehicles, and training people. Trust is there to help out in a lot of these things, monitoring their driving records and that they've got valid licenses. But it takes being intentional on this, and so that's the question or the plea that I have to you, is be intentional about that. The other side of it is we're here to help. Thanks, folks. Appreciate all you do out there. Be safe, and we'll talk to you real soon.